Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the channel. I am back again with an editorial analysis for you. And today this is about Election Commission of India. Now, what is the relevance of Election Commission of India? Election Commission of India is a constitutional body. We all are aware about that. And basically, many questions have appeared in previous year papers of civil services and other examinations from prelims also in mains also as to how we can ensure the independence of institutions. Constitutional bodies have to remain independent, and how can we ensure that these bodies remain independent? Now, this is what the editorial is all about. How can we uphold the autonomy of the Election Commission of India? Recently, what has happened? Before the Supreme Court of India, there is a bench of around 5 judges, a constitution bench, which is looking into the method of appointment of Election Commission of India. I mean, method of appointments of election commissioners of India, and how is the composition of Election Commission of India decided. The basic bone of contention or the issue that has been raised before the constitution bench is this, that since it is an independent body and the purpose is to conduct free and fair elections, the body needs to remain independent from the executive control. Now, when we say executive, we just not mean the president, we also mean the council of ministers, we also mean the ruling government. So, whether the appointment of election commissioner of India or appointment of other election commissioners is constitutional if it is being done solely by the executive. Now we know that these elections are basically done by president, or you can say not elections, the appointments are basically done by the president of India. But the president of India cannot act against the advice of council of ministers, and there again the government comes into picture. What will happen if election commissioner of India is not going to rule against the party which is in power right now? For example, if in central government some party X is in power and there is another election going to be conducted in the coming months in some other state, can the election commissioner of India take decision against the party X? These are the questions where Supreme Court is about to deliver its judgment. It has reserved its judgment and it might release it in the month of January. But here the author mentions about two or three things we need to take a keen note of. Firstly, he mentions that how healthy democracies ensure that elections to independent bodies like Information Commission, Human Rights Commission, and Election Commission remain independent. To use that, he used the reference of South Africa and Kenyan constitutions, followed by he further used the former judgments that have been given by the Supreme Court of India with regards to the appointment of CBI director. He also highlights a very recent issue of the collegium system where the appointment of judges is again in question. And further, he goes on to conclude the point saying that not just the tenure and the salary and the terms and conditions have to be decided, have to be kept independent from the control of the executive, but it is also the appointment process which needs to remain independent. And appointment process should involve multiple stakeholders, multiple experts, judicial experts, including members of opposition. Now, this is where the author concludes by finally saying, looking at the solution, that it cannot be done by a Supreme Court decision alone. We need a political consensus on the entire matter. So, the basic points that he has highlighted, we are going to recapitulate it in a short span of 7 minutes, the next 7 minutes, because we try to cover an editorial within the 10 minutes. Now, I try to take the most important and cognate editorials which are really relevant for you. So please bear with me for another 6 to 7 minutes. Author mentions that there are three organs of the government: the legislature, executive, and judiciary. These three organs of the government should remain completely independent from each other. However, they have distinct functions, but system of checks and balances should be there, is to be maintained, and it is also provided in the constitution. Now, the system of checks and balances ensure that no organ is trespassing its own powers or acting beyond its jurisdiction, or the kshetra adhikar that we can say. So, to enforce the fundamental rights of citizens, constitutional rights of citizens, we need fourth branch of institutions also, which are completely independent. and they cannot remain independent, just a minute. And these organs cannot remain independent if there is no infrastructure, for implementation of their independence. For implementation of what? Their decisions? No, for the implementation of basically all those factors which ensure that these bodies remain independent. So you need to notice the solution that the author is telling you. He tells you that one possible alternative is for the court to hand down a suspended declaration of invalidity, which means it is a sort of a remedy where the court tries to provide some interim guidelines which are not final, but leaves it to the more permanent structural solution that can be adopted by the legislature, the lawmaking body. Now it is for the court to decide that how best that might be achieved, and the guiding principles must be functional and effective. Independence from the executive has to be ensured, not just from the moment of appointment but to the retirement stage also, and then beyond it. If a person of independent organization is given the allurement of some Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha seat, some nominations, some post with the government of India, the body cannot act independently during the tenure. Now, these all are the matters. So there are additional certain organs that should remain independent, which form the basics of the fourth category of institutions, you can say infrastructure for implementation. First being Election Commission of India, the second being Information Commissioner. Now, there are other bodies also that should remain independent, like National Commission for Women is there, National Human Rights Commission is there. You can also have National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, National Commission for Backward Classes, and other such bodies which are mentioned in the Constitution of India. The other bodies also who are primarily required to be independent are Comptroller Auditor General of India and Union Public Service Commissions. Combined four bodies are called as the bulwarks of Indian Constitution. So there is a question for you. Try to tell me in the comment section which bodies are called as the bulwarks of Indian Constitution, and you can refer to Lakshmi Kant to find the answer to this particular question. So, Election Commission of India and Information Commission of India both are such bodies which enforce the rights of citizens. Now, these rights are in such nature that they are the constitutional rights. For example, right to vote is there and right to information is there. And both these rights are available to every personal individual against the executive. So, these rights are enforced basically against the executive. Now, this is something we need to catch. Since they are enforced against the executive, we need to ensure that the executive does not influence them. So that is why they must be free from the executive control. But how do we ensure independence? What are the factors that should remain independent? The terms and conditions of work should remain independent. The government should not decide that. The payment, salaries, and allowances should not be to the disadvantage of the person and should not be decided by the government. So payment, salaries, and allowances have to also come from a particular law, which is why we say that India has rule of law. All right, and only legislature can do it. Also, the appointments, the tenure, the terms and conditions of retirement, post-retirement benefits, and all should also remain completely independent from the executive control. The government should not have any say in deciding all of that. So, what has South Africa and Kenya done to ensure the independence of these particular institutions? So, African and Kenyan constitution basically calls these bodies as integrity institutions in their constitutions. Now, integrity in constitution institutions are also recognized by Indian constitution, and to a limited extent, Indian constitution has tried to keep them independent, but in terms of tenure and removal only. Like once election commissioner of India is appointed, he cannot be removed by the government of India. Once the information commissioner is appointed, he also cannot be removed by the government of India, and these are the factors. However, the appointments of these particular posts and bodies and persons still belong to the Council of Ministers and President of India, who has to mandatorily work in accordance with the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, which does not ensure their independence. There is also similar matter coming before us regarding the collegium system which is for the appointment of judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court, and the National Judicial Appointment Commission debate, where executive has a larger say as to who shall be the judge of a High Court or a Supreme Court of India. Now, this is again a matter where we are talking about the independence of independent institutions of the Supreme Court and the High Court. And these are the judicial organs and they should remain independent. And this is the basic structure doctrine also of the Indian Constitution. So, another matter that similar matter that came before which and which is also a decided matter was before the Supreme Court of India in Vineet Narayan case. And why we are referring to all of this? Because the author is mentioning that there are too many dangers. The perils of executive power over appointment of independent bodies is too large and too vague to ignore. So we cannot completely ignore this matter, and the Supreme Court of India has tried to create a guideline in the Vineet Narayan case with regards to the appointment of CBI director, that the CBI director appointment has to be approved by a three-membered body where the Prime Minister would be one person, leader of opposition would be the other person, and Chief Justice of India would be the third person to ensure that the systems of checks and balances are there. So what is ultimately the way forward that the author is suggesting? I am concluding in the next 30 seconds before you. Since India is a constitutional democracy, it should ensure that there are certain independent organizations which act as infrastructure for implementation. And they should remain independent. They should remain independent in terms of their appointment. They should also involve multiple judicial and executive bodies during the appointment procedure. And no single body should have a complete veto over this, which means they should remain completely independent from the executive control. But this alone cannot be done with the Supreme Court decision, and which is not sufficient also. We need to build a political consensus where all the political parties are having the right kind of mindset and direction. We also need to have a large public deliberation on this particular matter, and large public deliberation means that it can all happen in the legislature or the lawmaking bodies, and then we need a new legislation or amendments in the old law. So either we need a new law or we need an amendment in the old law to ensure that the bodies remain independent. So in this particular matter is important from GS2 as to how we can ensure the independence of the fourth pillar of, or you can say fourth infrastructure, fourth branch of institutions, including Election Commission, National Human Rights Commission, Information Commission, Comptroller, Auditor General, Union Public Service Commission, and other such bodies from the executive control. So this was Harshvardhan Tripathi signing off from today's editorial analysis. I'll see you guys in the next.